It had been years since Emily last visited her old friend, Laura. Life had pulled them in different directions. Emily moved to Boston for work, while Laura stayed in Maine, raising her son, Ethan. The two women used to be inseparable during their college years. They shared dreams, heartbreaks, and laughter that echoed in the halls of their small dorm. But as time passed, careers, marriages, responsibilities created distance between them. When Laura invited Emily to spend the weekend at her home after almost a decade apart, Emily didn't hesitate. She needed a break from her routine, a quiet place where she could breathe again. Her marriage to Mark had grown distant. The silence between them had become heavy, filled with polite conversations and forgotten warmth. Emily hoped that being around an old friend might remind her of who she used to be. The moment Emily arrived at Laura's house, nostalgia washed over her. The scent of pine trees, the soft coastal air, it all felt comforting. Laura hugged her tightly, the kind of embrace that made Emily feel instantly at home. "You haven't changed a bit," Laura laughed. Emily smiled back, though deep down she knew she had changed in more ways than she could explain. Dinner that evening was full of chatter. Laura's son, Ethan, now 24, joined them. Emily had last seen him when he was a shy teenager, quiet and awkward. But the young man who sat across the table now was confident, kind-eyed, and thoughtful. He spoke with a calm assurance that surprised her. It was strange, almost surreal, to see how much he had grown. He was studying architecture in New York, and his maturity stood out immediately. "You probably don't even remember me," Emily said with a teasing smile. "I do," Ethan replied, returning her smile. "You used to read to me when Mom got busy in the kitchen. You always brought those big city chocolates I wasn't supposed to eat before dinner." Everyone laughed, and Emily found herself relaxing. She hadn't realized how much she missed feeling light, like this, free from pressure or expectation. As the night went on, they shared stories and memories. Laura talked about her job at the local library, while Ethan described the challenges of design school. Emily listened, genuinely fascinated. She couldn't remember the last time someone spoke with such enthusiasm about their dreams. Somewhere inside, she felt something stir, a quiet reminder of her own forgotten ambitions, the ones she had buried under years of routine. When the night ended, Laura went upstairs early, exhausted from cooking. Ethan stayed behind, helping Emily clear the table. "You can leave those," Emily said softly. But Ethan shook his head. "You're the guest," he said. "Let me." His voice was gentle, polite, but steady. They worked side by side, stacking plates and rinsing dishes. There was an ease between them, natural and unforced. When Emily thanked him, he simply smiled, a little shyly. "You were always kind to me," he said. "I never forgot that." Something about his tone lingered in the air, a warmth that wasn't romantic but deeply human. Emily went to bed that night feeling strangely moved. Maybe it was the kindness. Maybe it was the way he looked at people when they spoke, really listening. Or maybe it was simply the reminder that there were still people in the world who cared deeply, who still saw goodness in others. The next morning was filled with laughter again. Laura prepared breakfast while Emily and Ethan chatted over coffee. He asked about her job in marketing, about Boston, about life in the city. He listened intently, genuinely curious. Emily couldn't remember the last time someone had asked her about her life without interrupting. There was no judgment, no pity, just attention. Throughout the day, Emily noticed small things about him. He was patient with his mother, helped fix a broken garden chair, and spoke to her with such respect that it softened Emily's heart. He had the same kindness Laura had always carried, but expressed in his own quiet way. That evening, Laura decided to visit a neighbor for tea, leaving Emily and Ethan at the house. "You two can handle yourselves," she joked. "Don't burn down my kitchen." As the door closed behind Laura, silence settled in. Emily sat on the porch with a blanket, sipping tea as the evening light turned golden. Ethan joined her, sitting a few feet away. The world outside was calm, the kind of calm that made every thought louder. "You seem quieter than last night," he said gently. "Just tired," Emily replied with a soft smile. "It's been a long few months." "Work?" he asked. Work, life, everything. She paused, looking out into the fading light. Sometimes it feels like I'm living on repeat. Same day, same faces, same emptiness. Ethan didn't interrupt. He simply listened. It was a kind of silence that wasn't awkward, it was understanding. Then he said, you don't look like someone who's given up. You look like someone who still wants more, just forgot how to ask for it. His words caught her off guard. No one had ever said that to her, not even Mark. She looked at him, and in that quiet moment, something inside her softened. There was no romantic spark, no forbidden thought, just recognition. Someone had seen her pain without her having to explain it. I used to love painting, she said after a while. Before I got busy being someone's wife, someone's employee, someone's... Everything else, then start again, Ethan said simply. No one's stopping you. Emily laughed softly, but there was a tremor in her voice. It's not that easy. Maybe not, he said. But doing nothing isn't easy either. They talked for hours after that about dreams, fears, and the strange ways people drift from themselves as they grow older. Ethan spoke like an old soul, someone who understood life deeper than his years should allow. Emily found herself opening up in ways she hadn't with anyone in years. There was something healing about it, something pure. When Laura returned, she found them still sitting on the porch, cups empty, faces calm. You two look serious, she teased. Solving the world's problems. Something like that, Ethan said with a smile. Emily went to bed that night feeling lighter, but her thoughts lingered. His words echoed in her mind. You don't look like someone who's given up. She lay awake for hours, thinking about her life, her choices, her quiet sadness. Ethan had unknowingly reminded her of something she'd lost, the desire to feel alive again. The next day passed quietly. They took a walk through the nearby forest trail, the one Laura had loved since childhood. Emily admired how peaceful it was. Ethan walked beside her, talking about architecture and how he wanted to design homes that made people feel something: warmth, hope, peace. His passion moved her. It reminded her of the kind of love she once had for her own work. When they returned home that evening, Laura was busy preparing dinner again. As Emily helped her, Laura smiled and said, Ethan really likes talking to you. He says you remind him of the kind of people he wants to be around. Real honest. Emily smiled but said nothing. She didn't know what to make of that. She liked talking to him. To it wasn't complicated or inappropriate. It was just real, something her life had been missing for far too long. That night, when everyone went to bed, Emily found herself standing by the window, looking out at the quiet street. The house was dark except for the faint light from Ethan's room. For a fleeting moment, she thought about how strange life could be, how comfort could appear in unexpected places, how someone much younger could make you remember something forgotten. And as she finally closed her eyes, a thought settled in her mind, not dangerous, not romantic, but awakening. Maybe I've been asleep for too long, she thought. Maybe it's time to start living again. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the curtains, touching Emily's face as she opened her eyes. She hadn't slept much, but for the first time in months, she didn't feel heavy. Her heart was lighter, as if someone had dusted off an old part of her that had been hidden too long. She could still hear Ethan's words in her mind. You don't look like someone who's given up. It was strange how one honest sentence from someone younger could stir something so deep. She got up early, walked outside, and stood on the porch with a cup of coffee. The air was cool and quiet. In the distance, the sound of waves brushing against the shore echoed faintly. It reminded her of simpler times. Before her life became filled with checklists and empty conversations, Laura joined her soon after, yawning and smiling. You're up early, she said. That's new. Emily laughed softly. Couldn't sleep? Still thinking about work? Emily hesitated. Thinking about everything, I guess. Laura gave her a knowing look. You've been carrying too much for too long, she said gently. You need to start living for yourself again. They talked for a while, but Emily's thoughts kept wandering. She glanced toward the backyard where Ethan was fixing the old fence. The morning sun caught his face. And she noticed again how calm and grounded he seemed, like someone who knew where he was going. It wasn't attraction. It was admiration. She envied that kind of peace. Later that day, they all went into town to visit the small farmer's market. Laura insisted on driving, but halfway there she got a call from a friend who needed help at the library. "You two go ahead," she said. "I'll catch up later." So, for the first time, Emily and Ethan were alone together. The drive was quiet at first, comfortable but unspoken. The car windows were down, the wind brushing against their faces. Emily found herself smiling without reason. "You know," she said, "I can't remember the last time I felt this calm." Ethan glanced at her, smiling. "Then you're in the right place. Maine has that effect on people. It's not just Maine," she replied softly. "It's ease. The company, too." He didn't say anything, but his expression shifted, thoughtful, almost protective. There was something in his quiet presence that made Emily feel seen. It wasn't romantic. It was understanding something she'd been craving for years without realizing it. When they reached the market, the smell of fresh bread and roasted coffee filled the air. They walked side by side, browsing through stalls of handmade candles and old books. Emily picked up a small watercolor painting of a lighthouse. "This reminds me of the view near your house," she said. Ethan nodded. "That's why I love it here. Everything feels real, like it's been touched by someone's heart." She looked at him then, seeing more than a young man, seeing a person who carried depth far beyond his years. There was a certain calm strength in him that felt rare. After grabbing lunch, they sat on a wooden bench near the harbor. Boats drifted lazily across the water and seagulls called overhead. For a while, neither of them spoke. Emily simply breathed, letting the silence do what words couldn't. Finally, Ethan said quietly, "You don't talk much about yourself." Emily smiled faintly. "There's not much to tell." "I don't believe that," he said, turning toward her. "You just stopped telling your stories somewhere along the way." His words hit her harder than she expected. She wanted to deny it, but deep down she knew he was right. She had stopped talking about her dreams, her wants, even her pain. She had become quiet in her own life. They sat there until the sun began to set, painting the water in gold and pink. Emily felt something she hadn't in years. Peace mixed with possibility. When Laura called to say she'd meet them back home, they drove in silence again, but this time it was different. The air between them was charged with something real. Not romantic, not forbidden, but emotional. It was two souls recognizing each other's loneliness and offering quiet understanding. That night, after dinner, Laura excused herself early again. Emily and Ethan stayed in the living room watching an old movie. She laughed at something on screen, and Ethan looked at her, not in admiration, but in a way that said, "You've come back to life a little." When the credits rolled, neither of them spoke for a moment. Then Ethan said softly, "You seem different tonight." "Different how?" she asked. "Lighter, happier." Emily smiled, her eyes warm. "Maybe because I remembered what it feels like to be heard." He nodded, understanding without needing to ask more. A storm began to rumble outside, rain tapping against the windows. They sat there, listening to the sound of it. There was a comfort in the shared silence, the kind of quiet that didn't need to be filled. When Emily finally stood to go upstairs, Ethan said, "Emily." She turned back. "I'm glad you came. Mom needed you here. But I think you needed this place too." She paused, surprised by how true that sounded. "Maybe I did." That night she lay awake again, not from worry, but from thought. She thought about her life back in Boston, the cold apartment, the empty routine, the strained silence between her and Mark. For the first time, she wondered if she had accepted too little from life simply because she had forgotten she deserved more. The next day, rain continued, soft and steady. Laura left early for errands, and Emily spent most of the morning painting, something she hadn't done in over 10 years. She found an old box of supplies in Laura's attic, dusted them off, and began painting the view from the window, the gray sky, the wet trees, the calm sea in the distance. Ethan walked in quietly, holding 2 mugs of tea. "I didn't know you paint," he said. "I used to," she replied, smiling faintly. "Then I stopped having time for it." He watched for a moment, then said, "You haven't lost it. You just forgot how good you are." She laughed softly, shaking her head. "You always know the right thing to say, don't you?" "Only when it's true," he said simply. They talked for a while as the rain fell outside. It felt easy, effortless. Ethan told her about his plans after graduation, how he wanted to design homes that made people feel something: warmth, safety, peace. Emily found herself inspired by his words. There was a purity in his ambition, something she had lost long ago. Later that afternoon, Laura returned, and the day went on as usual. But Emily could feel the change inside her. Something in her had awakened, not because of romance or temptation, but because someone reminded her she was still alive. That evening, after dinner, Laura received another call from the library and had to step out. "I won't be long," she said. "You two can keep each other company." As the door closed behind her, the house felt still again. Emily sat by the fireplace, sketching quietly. Ethan came in, drying his hair after a shower. "You're really serious about this painting thing," he said with a grin. She smiled. "I think I've missed it more than I realized." "You should keep doing it," he said. "You look happy when you do." Emily paused, looking up at him. There was sincerity in his eyes, not flirtation, not admiration, but genuine care. "Thank you," she said softly, "for reminding me what that feels like." He sat down across from her, the firelight flickering between them. "You remind me of what it means to keep believing," he said. "Most people my age rush through everything. You take your time. You notice things." Emily laughed gently. "That's just another way of saying I'm old," he smiled. "No, that's another way of saying you still care." They both fell silent, listening to the crackling fire. The warmth in the room wasn't just from the flames, it was from the shared understanding between two people who had given each other something they didn't know they needed. When Laura returned later, Emily felt a strange gratitude for being there, for the timing, for the unexpected friendship that had reminded her that life still had beauty in it. That night, before bed, she wrote in her notebook for the first time in years, "Maybe life doesn't end where the pain begins. Maybe it starts again when someone helps you remember who you are." As she closed the notebook, she smiled quietly to herself, unaware that the next day would bring a conversation she would never forget. One that would stay with her long after she left Maine. The next morning, the air was crisp, touched by the faint smell of the ocean. Emily woke up early again, but this time she felt steady, not restless. She had painted until midnight, losing herself in colors and light. For the first time in years, she had felt proud of something she'd made with her own hands. Downstairs, Laura was already at the kitchen table with coffee. "Morning, artist," she said with a teasing grin. "Ethan showed me your painting last night. It's beautiful." Emily smiled, a little embarrassed. "He shouldn't have." "Oh, don't be shy," Laura said warmly. "You've still got it. I think this place has done you some good." Emily nodded. "It has. More than I expected." After breakfast, Laura had to run errands again, and Ethan offered to drive Emily to a small art supply store in town. She hesitated, then agreed. The road wound through quiet hills and forests still wet from the rain. They talked easily, like they had known each other much longer than a few days, at the shop. Emily picked out new brushes and a sketchbook. Ethan waited patiently, carrying her things without being asked. There was something old-fashioned about his kindness, something that made her think about how far the world had drifted from such simple decency. On the way back, they stopped by a small cliff overlooking the sea. The view stretched endlessly, gray-blue waves hitting the rocks below. Emily stood there quietly, the wind tugging at her hair. "It's beautiful," she said softly. "It is," Ethan agreed, then glanced at her. "You look happier when you're out here. Like this place lets you breathe again." Emily smiled faintly. "I think I forgot what that felt like." He picked up a stone and threw it into the water. "You know," he said after a pause, "when I was younger, you seemed like someone who had everything figured out. Confident, fearless. I used to think adults like you never got lost." She laughed lightly. If only that were true. We just get better at pretending. He nodded thoughtfully. Maybe, but I think you're finding yourself again. She looked at him, surprised by how much truth sat in his words. He had this way of saying things that went straight to her heart. They stayed there until the clouds began to roll in again, the sky darkening over the horizon. On the drive home, neither said much, but the silence felt full of meaning. Emily couldn't explain a tit. Wasn't love. It wasn't confusion. It was gratitude. Ethan had helped her remember something she thought she'd lost forever: the ability to feel alive. That evening, Laura planned a small dinner for a few neighbors. The house filled with laughter and voices. Emily helped serve food, smiling easily. For the first time, she didn't feel like she was pretending to be okay. She actually was. When the night ended and everyone left, only Emily, Laura, and Ethan remained. Laura yawned and excused herself, saying she needed to sleep early for her morning shift. "Don't stay up too late." "You too," she said with a smile before heading upstairs. The house fell quiet again, the way it always did after company left. Emily began clearing the dishes and Ethan joined her. It felt familiar now, their quiet teamwork in the kitchen. When the last dish was done, Emily turned to say goodnight, but Ethan hesitated. "Emily, can I ask you something?" "Of course." He took a breath as if gathering courage. "Do you ever think about starting over? Not running away, but choosing something different?" "For yourself?" She froze for a second. The question hit too close. She thought about her life in Boston, her distant husband, her lifeless home, her quiet exhaustion. "I think about it all the time," she said finally. "But thinking and doing are two different things." "Maybe," he said softly, "but you deserve to be happy. You've given so much to everyone else. Maybe it's time you gave something back to yourself." Emily looked at him, her eyes soft with emotion. She didn't know what to say. His words weren't romantic, they were honest, pure. They carried no expectation, only care. "Thank you," she whispered. "You have no idea how much that means to me." Smiled. "I think I do." They stood there for a moment, the air still between them. The connection wasn't one of attraction, it was of recognition. Of two people seeing each other clearly for who they were. "Good night." "Ethan," she said finally, her voice steady but tender. "Good night." "Emily," she went upstairs, closed her door and leaned against it, her heart quietly full. That night, she didn't dream of the past or her old regrets. She dreamed of possibility of color, laughter, and sunlight. The next morning was her last day in Maine. Her bags were packed. Laura was already making breakfast downstairs. Ethan helped load her car, his movements quiet and thoughtful. "I can't believe the weekend's already over," Laura said. "You have to promise to visit again soon." "I will," Emily replied sincerely. "This place reminded me of who I am." Laura smiled. "Good. You needed that." Ethan stood beside them, hands in his pockets. There was something he wanted to say. Emily could tell. When Laura went inside to grab a few things, Ethan finally spoke. "You're really leaving?" He asked quietly. "I have to," Emily said gently. "My life's still waiting for me." He nodded, looking down. "I know. I'm glad I got to know you like this. Not as mom's friend, but as someone who changed how I see things." Emily smiled, touched. "You did the same for me, Ethan. You reminded me that there's more to life than routine." He hesitated, then said softly, "Promise me you'll keep painting." "I will," she said. "I promise." They shared one last quiet look, understanding that this connection, however brief, had left a mark on both of them. Then Laura returned and they said their goodbyes. As Emily drove away, she glanced in the rearview mirror. Ethan stood by the porch, waving slightly. The image stayed with her long after the house disappeared behind the trees. When she returned to Boston, the city felt different. Or maybe she did. The noise, the gray skies, the endless rush, it all felt lighter now, less suffocating. That evening, she unpacked her art supplies and set up a small corner by the window. She painted until the sun dipped below the skyline, Days turned into weeks, and the change in her grew visible. Her colleagues noticed the spark in her voice again, the way she smiled more easily. Mark, her husband, watched her quietly, puzzled at first. One night he asked, "You seem different lately, happier." Emily looked at him, surprised by the softness in his tone. "Maybe I just remembered how to breathe again." He nodded slowly, unsure what she meant, but grateful for it. For the first time in years, their silence didn't feel heavy. Months later, Emily received a letter in the mail. The handwriting was familiar, neat, thoughtful. It was from Ethan. "Dear Emily, I wanted to thank you. Because of you, I decided to apply for a program, a broad one, that focuses on designing community homes. You told me to follow my passion, and I finally listened. I hope you're painting. I hope you're still living the way you made me believe was possible." Ethan. Emily smiled as she read it. The letter wasn't sentimental, it was hopeful. A quiet reminder of how two people's paths could cross and leave both forever changed. That night, she painted again. The sea in her mind, the soft main light in her memory. The brush moved easily, and for once she didn't worry about the past or the future. She was simply here, alive, present, and at peace. Weeks later, she visited an art gallery downtown. On one of the walls hung her latest painting, a lighthouse surrounded by golden waves. The same view she had seen from the cliff with Ethan. Below it, she had written a small note, dedicated to those who remind us who we are, even for a moment. As she stood there, someone beside her whispered, "It's beautiful." She turned and saw Mark, her husband, smiling quietly. He took her hand, and for the first time in years, it didn't feel forced. Maybe the two of them still had a chance not to start over completely, but to rediscover what they had lost along the way. And in that moment, Emily realized something profound. Sometimes, life doesn't give you new love, it gives you new light. It gives you people who come and go, not to stay, but to show you the parts of yourself you'd forgotten. Ethan had been that light. Not a temptation, not a mistake. Just a reminder that even after years of silence, the heart can still wake up and find its way home. As she walked out of the gallery hand in hand with her husband, Emily felt calm, whole, and quietly grateful for the boy who had spoken to her like no one ever had, and for the woman she had finally become.